I'm back and welcome to a video about my series shame. So these are all of the book series that I have started last year and also continued last year, but also the series that I don't want to continue at all and I've put down. Firstly, I'll start with what I have rejected from my to be read pile, and that would be Half a Soul. I only enjoyed it and then I could move on. So I don't feel like I need to continue reading the series / companions that make up the rest of this trilogy, I guess. Then I plan to unhaul this book as well, and that is The Malevolent Seven by Sebastian de Castell. The more I think about this, the more I realize that I didn't enjoy it as much as I really wanted to. I initially gave it 4 stars, I've now moved it to 3.5 and then 3 stars. It just didn't have the characters having a meaningful connection in the same way that The Greatcoats did, which is his other series. I just love the idealism and the attempt at being a hero, even though he knows the main character he's not a hero, whereas in this book they are all mercenaries and the main character keeps choosing the wrong thing to do because he's like, I'm not a good guy, but then he gets conflicted about doing the wrong thing and I'm like, clearly you are not a bad guy, so maybe have that epiphany and then I can enjoy the book, but I've got no desire to read any further. So like Half a Soul, I'm unhauling this very soon. Then I read The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane, which is a male-male romance, but it also had a reality TV storyline all the way through it. And while I don't hate that, I also just don't love it. And I didn't like the way that the ending felt like it had a lot of other people involved. I like my romance to be localized with these 2 characters that are the leads, rather than having other people in the story view it for their own almost consumption. And I should have kind of expected that with the reality TV show, but I hate when plot points occur that are significant and emotionally vulnerable for our characters in front of other people. And that kind of happened in Alison Cochrane's other book that I read, which was Kiss Her Once for me. So I also got rid of The Charm Offensive. I did give it 3 stars, so I enjoyed it enough to end up finishing it because I put down books quite often. I put down like 30 books in 2023 and I obviously finished this one. So I liked it, but I just didn't like it enough to keep it. Then I put down Fix It Witches. The first book is Witch Please. I've mentioned this before on my channel. I could not get on board with the whole like leaving the witch thing a secret, and it's addressed apparently later on in the series, but I wasn't interested in reading on further to that point because the protagonist in the sequel just drove me insane, and I'd read like 4 or 5 pages and I'm like, I know that I'm not going to be continuing this one, so I put the series down. Similarly, I read Payback's a Witch, another witchy book. However, I finished this one and I gave it, I think, a 4 stars. It's a sapphic female-female romance, and the protagonist comes back to this small town after being away for a long time and kind of rekindles and discovers her magic again. So I like the small town vibe to this and how the character seems to know everybody, but is also removed because she hasn't been back for a while. And I like the building of the relationship, how there was communication, but the characters that I care about, their story is now done, and this is a companion series as well, as most romance series are. So I don't really care about continuing this one because, I mean, the other characters are probably great, but I'm just personally not interested in continuing. So it's not like anything is actively bad about this that I don't want to continue it. I just don't feel like I need to. Speaking of actively bad though, I don't know if people are going to hate me for this, but Skyward by Brandon Sanderson is a series that I have completely and utterly decided not to continue reading. Skyward was fantastic. Starsight was still okay. Cytonic, not good at all. I gave it 3 when I initially read it. I'd probably give it like a 2 or less now. And I read all of the novellas in that series as well before the 4th book, Defiant, came out. I think that's now out. I've just decided that it's gone completely on a tangent. It's diluted what Sanderson's writing could be, and I just feel like the characters are very much like surface archetypes rather than actually being deep enough for me to care about them. I just hated the way that the story was written in Cytonic. I hated the tone of voice. Anyway, it was just terrible. And I was like, oh, I just need to finish Defiant. I need to read it and then that series is done. But you know what? I'm actively not excited about Defiant. So why would I go out and spend my hard-earned money on it and then spend time on it as well that I just don't want to be spending? So I was like, I'm not going to read anymore. And then I felt freer. Then second last on my series I have not continued with is Legendborn, which is an Arthurian legend retelling about a girl in modern day who goes to this college, but at this college there's this secret society of Arthurian legends, and these characters are often reincarnated to follow the different bloodlines, and with that comes magic. And this character discovers this world and gets involved in this magic. She's also at the time grieving because she's recently lost her mother, and so she's going to the same college that her mother did to kind of rekindle this feeling of connection to her as she's grieving her loss. So while I loved the world building and the lore associated with this series, I read the second book and it felt like it was really predictable, and not in a good way. If I can predict a story and it's gotten to this point that it's been leading to the whole time, and then it just does something fantastic with it, or there's a cool character moment or a few of those that then spin off into new storylines and tangents, I'm like, yes, I predicted this, but I don't care because I'm so emotionally invested. In this series, it was just kind of predictable and not super deep that I felt, so I'm like, I don't feel like I need to continue reading it. I feel like based on the second book I could predict where it was going to go next, and I'm like, I don't really want to read about that, so I ended up selling them. They're now no longer owned by me. When I say them too, I mean Bloodmarked and Legendborn, the first two books. I read them and they needed to go. Then this last one might be a surprise given how much I've loved this graphic novel series, and that is Lore Olympus. So I read this at the end of 2023 and I was actually a little bit disappointed by the way it was taking its story and its characters. It might be redeeming in some aspects and it might not be a very long-lived character arc for what it's doing now, but I'm not really interested anymore. And for something that is this expensive, I thought, why am I continuing when I'm only giving it 3.5 stars? And I know that it's a webtoon online, so I don't know if I'm going to pick it up at some point again in the future, and that will be the webtoon. And then if I like the webtoon and how that's continuing, I can then go and buy the volumes again. But at the moment, I'm just putting this series on pause. It's not one that I'm going to actively go, nope, I'm getting rid of it completely, I don't want to read it anymore, because I have loved this series, but I also don't want to actively be buying it right now. So I think it's just going to sit for a while on my shelves and look pretty, and then maybe sometime in the distant future I'll pick it up again, who knows. So now we're going to get into series that I have started and continued in 2023 that I hope to carry on depending on their release dates for whatever books are coming out next. And the first one that I want to talk about is Fence. And this is a graphic novel series about Nicholas, and he wants to become a fencing champion, and he goes to a college in order to join their fencing club. But the fencing is very like highbrow, and he's kind of like what is considered the rebel or the amateur, I guess. And I think it's also a slow burn romance between one of the guys in here and Nicholas, but it's building up very, very slowly. And I like how it started with the technicalities of fencing, so you get that understanding, and then after that it really gets you settled in building up all the characters and the humor and the dynamics between them all. And I really liked seeing all of those dynamics, which is why I then want to continue on with volume 6. And I think that came out in January. I just haven't owned it yet, but I do plan to. So it's a series that I've clearly really enjoyed so far. And then this book made it into my best books of 2023 video, and that is City of Stairs. Now, I also have City of Blades, so I am very well set up to continue reading this series. So I have a few Robert Jackson Bennett books that I need to get through, but City of Blades is on my priority list because it's a sci-fi fantasy and it's got a fantastic magic system, fantastic politics, and it's just so dynamic. I just don't see anything coming, and everything feels so well integrated into the world that you just don't question anything. I loved this one and I can't wait to continue reading it. Then I read some audiobooks, and one of them was The House Witch, and this is a cozy fantasy story about a guy named Finn who wants to be a witch far away from home because witches aren't really revered in this society. Mages are revered, but witches are very much frowned upon because of their reputation, but it's kind of stereotypical. And so he's like, I need a bit of distance from my past, and he goes to become the chef of this royal castle, but his magic is house magic, which is why it's called The House Witch. So the more that he fosters this comfort and this food in this kitchen and opens the space for people to come in and be trusted and know that they are safe, the more he actually grows in power. So it's cool to see him interacting with everyone. There is a romance that builds up towards the second half of this as well, which I quite enjoyed, and it's just such a wholesome story. And so I went out and I got books 2 and 3 on Audible, but I think there's also a book 4 maybe. I thought it was a trilogy, but I don't know. I need to research it more, but I also don't want to look at the synopses yet because I don't want to accidentally spoil myself. I think during the colder, cozier months, it might be one that I end up picking up on audiobook, but nonetheless, I really want to continue it. Oddly enough, I've got Hellbent on this list, and I thought Hellbent came out before 2023, but it must have been at the beginning of 2023. It feels like it should be a longer time ago that this one came out. It feels like I only just reread Ninth House. Then I've got one of my new favorite fantasy series, and that is The Chorus of Dragons. So Ruin of Kings is the first book. This is a 5-book queer adult fantasy series. In the first book, we are following Kieran, and he is a thief trying to save up a bunch of money so he can escape the city of Kerr. However, he overhears one night a demon talking to two mysterious people, and because he overhears them, the demon recognizes that they're being listened to, and he kind of gets a target put on his back. So he gets caught up in politics, underground criminal activity, magic systems, a long time standing political war between different family lines, and all of the magic entwined with that. There is body swapping, there is demons, there is just magic and chaos, and it's so fantastic and fast paced. So I quite enjoyed this one, and obviously I continued on reading the rest of them in the series, and I reread the first 2 books so that I could continue on the 3rd, 4th and 5th. So that tells you that I really enjoyed this series, and you know, they're not short, so I feel like I put a solid effort into finishing these. Jen Lyons also has a new book coming out in 2024, so now that I've finished with The Chorus of Dragons, I'm looking forward to reading her new book, but I think it's a standalone. Don't quote me, but I think it is. So it's not like I've got another potential Chorus of Dragons situation on my hands. I also ended up continuing Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse, and then the next book, Mirrored Heavens, is coming out I think in September or October 2024, and after really loving Black Sun and then only giving this like a 3, it set the characters up in different places to what I hoped they would be in, and so I don't know if I'm going to love Mirrored Heavens as much as this book. Kind of like Defiant, I don't want to go out and buy the last book in this series, but I kind of want to give it a chance at the same time. And I keep checking Audible and my library, and nowhere has the audiobook. So I'm like, is an audiobook even going to be made? Because the other 2 were made. So I think I'm just checking a little bit early, and I'm starting to catastrophize about whether I need to get it or not and read it. So I think I just need to calm down, hold my horses, and try it when it eventually comes out. I might end up waiting at the library if a lot of people also want to read it, but attempting to continue this is definitely in my future. I honestly could put it down right now and I don't think I would worry too much, but I've now decided that I'm going to continue it, so now I'm giving pressure to myself apparently. In 2023, I also read a whole host of romance books by Tessa Bailey. Some of the series I read like all the way through, and then others I read the first, not the second, and then the 3rd book, because romance is weird like that. You can just jump around. So one of them is Fix Her Up, and that is a story I think about a character who wants to be taken seriously because her family own this renovation business and she didn't want to be associated with them, so she went off and became a clown for people's birthday parties. So she doesn't get taken seriously because she's a literal clown. And I can't remember what the sequel is. It's yellow though, and I started that and just hated it because it's supposed to be about a married couple, and I think they just need to separate and go to therapy, but because they're the main 2 characters in a romance novel, obviously they're going to stay together, and I think at a certain point they actually do go to therapy, so A+ for that. But I just could not get past the tones of voice of these characters. Their goals just seemed incongruous, and it didn't seem like they were good for each other, so I'm like, nope, can't do it. And then I continued on to Tools of Engagement, which is the final one, and I think this is about a baseball player who had an injury and can't do baseball anymore, and also somehow related to renovations. I honestly don't remember, but it was, I guess, a romp. Like the first and the 3rd book were great, but the middle book, so I think I only gave them 3-ish stars each, which for a romance, like, that's fine. And it's why I ultimately continued reading, because I thought, you know, if I'm enjoying this, why not? But then I ended up continuing with Tessa Bailey. I don't know why. I guess because she was just a romance author that was easily accessible and kind of familiar to me. So I read Secretly Yours, and then I tried reading Unfortunately Yours. Not so great. And it seems like I've got a really low hit rate with Tessa Bailey. I either like it enough to finish it, or I just don't like it and put it down. I don't love anything that she's written. So I think in 2024 I need to rehash my approach on Tessa Bailey and maybe just not read her anymore. Then I continued a novella series with Bookshops and Bone Dust. It did take me a while to get through this because I put it down halfway through, which is silly because it's not that long, but I loved this cozy fantasy in the end. Even though I loved the first book, Legends and Lattes, a lot more. This was still quite enjoyable and it had those elements of coziness, but it feels like the story, while it gripped me at the beginning, it kind of lost me in the middle with the coziness and found family vibes. I felt like they could have been stronger and a little bit more knitted closely together, but it didn't quite nail it. But I still gave it 4 stars and I'm happy that I continued. And then there are 3 more books on this list. The last 2 are by the same author, but this one is Iron Flame, and I continued this after enjoying Fourth Wing. I didn't expect to like it because everyone was hyping it up and I thought, really, how good could it be? And it's not like it was a new favorite or anything, but it was motivating enough for me to be interested. And then I ended up continuing on with this one and was pleasantly surprised at how emotionally invested I was. You know, dragons in a fantasy book where there's a war college and magic and a protagonist who actually acknowledges things rather than just pretending they don't exist and then miscommunicating to everyone around her and hoping they read her mind. I'm glad that didn't happen and she was actually on the forefront of having discussions and being like, you need to tell me stuff because this is how I'm feeling. I have a lot of respect for Violet as a protagonist and I think that's why I ended up enjoying this a lot more than I thought I would. But I don't know when the next one's coming out. Maybe it'll be this year, but I honestly haven't looked anything up. I really hope it's soon though. And then the last 2 on this list are both by Rick Riordan, who wrote more books in the Percy Jackson universe for 2023. So one of them was The Sun and the Star, a Nico D'Angelo novel, I think it's called. And this one obviously followed Nico, who is a little bit older now after the events of Percy Jackson in the Olympian series, and he's now got a bit of PTSD based on all of the adventures that all of the kids went on. Like, they see really dark stuff and they've got to try and survive, so naturally it kind of messes with them, but you don't really get them mediating on that and having a discussion about it. They kind of just move on because it's a kid's book, you want to keep it moving. But this was a little bit older, but it was still kind of kiddie in some aspects of the tone. It felt like the story just got away from it in the middle and you could have cut a whole chunk out of it. So I was kind of disappointed by this one, even though I usually love Rick Riordan. But that leads me into Chalice of the Gods, which is the new release in the Percy Jackson series that was just fantastic. And I kind of had my mind blown a little bit because I didn't expect to love this as much as I did, because I'm like, how can Rick write a story about characters that we already know and love as they're older in a new way that entices new readers and also keeps all his old ones? But somehow he managed to balance that and walk along that line, and I have a lot of respect for him. And I also just really enjoyed the story. It was a great romp, but it added to the world building, it added to our characters that we know and love. It was just fantastic. So that is the high I would like to end this video on, because I'm just excited about the nostalgia of Percy Jackson and the fact that I get to keep revisiting it, because there are 2 more books coming out in that new trilogy. So I'm really excited. But that is all for this video. Let me know if you've got a few series on the go. I always have stuff on the go and I've probably forgotten things, so forgive me. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll chat to you down below in the comments and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.